Coming up, the NBA Draft Lottery picked a winner in the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You're listening to a special edition of Locked On Game to Game NBA. Local experts join us to break down the NBA Draft Lottery. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. The Pelicans heard their names called first on Tuesday, which is a dream for the players in the draft, but not for the teams in the lottery. Now officially holding the number 14 pick, Locked On Pelicans looks over the options for New Orleans.
The Pelicans get the 14th pick in the NBA draft, and everything is on the table for New Orleans. I'm Jake Madison, host of Locked On Pelicans. No lottery luck this year for the Pels, but that's okay. If healthy, this team is still got a solid roster capable of competing for home court in the West. And now they can go in any direction to bolster the team. They have enough future draft picks to trade up. They've done a good job recently of player evaluation and getting steals like Trey Murphy III at 17 overall after trading back. They could look to add more veteran depth and move the pick for an established NBA player, maybe a new center, another point guard, or some more shooting. Or they could just continue to build for the future and take the guy they like at 14. There's good depth in this draft. Honestly, while 14th overall isn't fun, it's still a pretty good spot to be in.
The Raptors will pick 13th in the upcoming NBA draft. Our Locked On Raptors host is perfectly fine with where Toronto stands.
13th it is. Sean with the here from Locked On Raptors to react to the Toronto Raptors staying put in the number 13 spot in the 2023 NBA draft after lottery night. No big surprise here. They had just a 1% chance of moving up to the number 1 selection and a 4.8% chance at moving into the top 4. They don't do that, but that's okay because the Raptors are a team right now that is badly in need of guard play and shooting, two extremely lacking skills on their roster. And as it happens, the 13th spot in the draft might be an ideal spot to be to get a guy who can address those needs. You know, there are guards like Cason Wallace, Keontae George, Nick Smith Jr., more wing types like Grady Dick or Jordan Hawkins, and a ton of other options who could be there for the Raptors at 13. And they should be able to add to their youthful core that features Scotty Barnes, Christian Koloko, Precious Achiuwa. Of course, they have loads of veterans on the team as well, plenty of pending UFAs. The team could look very different, but the 13th pick should be able to provide some sort of infusion of a badly needed skill to this Toronto Raptors team as they head into a very important offseason with lots of pending decisions still to be made. The 13th pick, obviously, very much one of those. I'll have more broken down about the Raptors, the draft lottery, and what they do next on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Raptors. Be sure to tune in.
Coming up, the Jazz and Wizards get their highest draft picks in a decade. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game is brought to you by Bird Dogs. They are some of the most comfortable shorts in the game, but they make you look put together as well. So you can wear them to the golf course, you can wear them to the game, you can wear them out on a date. Your significant other is going to think you look like you're all put together, but you're really just lounging in some comfortable shorts. Head over to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. When you enter promo code LockedOnNBA, they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. Welcome back. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. We thank you again for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. The Magic is the only team with 2 lottery picks getting both the 11th pick from Chicago and the 6th pick in the upcoming draft. With Orlando already one of the best young teams on the rise in the NBA, Locked On Magic looks at what Orlando could do with these selections.
This is Philip Rossman-Reich, the host of Locked On Magic, and the Orlando Magic have to feel okay with how their NBA draft lottery went. They're going to end up with the 6th and 11th picks in the upcoming draft. So they do get to keep the Bulls pick, complete the Nikola Vucevic trade, and they're going to get a chance to get 2 really quality players. Look, the Magic didn't win the lottery this time around. They're not going to be back-to-back lottery champions like they were last year when they got Paolo Banchero, but Paolo Banchero is exactly why they didn't need to win this lottery. Maybe that's rationalization because everyone would love a Victor Wembanyama. Congratulations to the Spurs, by the way. But what the Magic need are players that can contribute. They need players that are going to help them make the playoffs because there's already a foundation in place here in Orlando. The Magic certainly can feel like they're ready to take a step with Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner really on the cusp of stardom. They need to add players players to this team that are going to help them get better. And that's what they're going to get the opportunity to do with the 6th pick, with a player like Asar Thompson, with Cam Whitmore, with Taylor Hendricks. And that's what they're going to do with 11, where they'll have a chance to take another quality player as well. Not the best night, but overall a solid one for Orlando.
The Mavericks probably didn't expect to be part of this year's draft lottery after trading for Kyrie Irving at the deadline, but Dallas missed the playoffs and they now hold the number 10 pick in the draft this year. Our Locked On Mavs host has more as Dallas evaluates their position.
The Dallas Mavericks keep their pick, and we can all breathe a sigh of relief. Nick Angstead from the Locked On Mavericks podcast here. The Dallas Mavericks had a 20% chance to outright lose their pick and give it to the New York Knicks from the Porzingis trade years ago. That still is hanging over the Mavericks' head, but they keep the 10th pick in this draft. This is massive. The Mavericks have so many holes they need to fill on the roster, and now they can use this 10th pick as the best asset that they have to fill some of those holes. Can they get a starting center? Can they get a starting wing that can play 40 minutes in the playoffs? These are questions that Nico Harrison and the Mavs staff are going to have to answer over the next couple of weeks here. But the Dallas Mavericks keep the 10th pick and will most likely trade it and trying to improve the roster right now around Luka Doncic and hopefully Kyrie Irving.
After 6 straight years in the playoffs, the Utah Jazz returned to the draft lottery this season. They now have their highest pick since 2014. Locked On Jazz goes over Utah's 3 first-round picks, including number 9 overall.
There was no lottery luck for the Utah Jazz as they held in the 9th position of the lottery, but the draft day still should be an interesting one for Utah. David Locke of Locked On Jazz. The Jazz are at 9th, but they also hold the 16th pick courtesy of Minnesota and the 28th pick courtesy of a Royce O'Neal trade. Plus, they have the cadre of picks they still have left from the Rudy Gobert trade to Minnesota, as well as the Donovan Mitchell trade. If, in fact, the Jazz wanted to move up in the draft, they have plenty of ammunition to do so. If they do not, well, then the name Anthony Black, as well as Grady Dick or Taylor Hendricks or Kobe Buffin or Cason Wallace will be the names most talked about for the next period of time for the Utah Jazz at that 9th pick. But then another collection of players will be talked about at the 16th, some of which might also be available at 9. A lot of shifting still available and a lot of options left for the Utah Jazz as they head into this with 3 first-round picks.
After pick number 8, the Wizards hold their highest draft pick since taking Otto Porter Jr. in 2013. Locked On Wizards looks at the options for Washington.
Welcome to the Locked On Wizards podcast. It's your hosts, Red Oliver and Brandon Scott. The Wizards end up with the 8th pick and get no luck at all. They had a 28% chance of getting to the top 4 and a 6% chance of getting number 1. The Spurs end up with Victor Wembanyama, but the Wizards end up with the 8th pick. What do you think about it, Brandon?
I think it's time to go ahead and get that point guard of the future. I think at the 8th pick, if you grab Anthony Black or Cason Wallace, I think that is a good draft. You know, Cason Wallace, he can defend, he can shoot, and Anthony Black's got width to him. So I think both of them could come in and do well in DC. Now the question is obviously with this veteran core of the solid 3 of Kyle Kuzma, Bradley Beal, and Kristaps Porzingis, you know, where they fit in, you know, there's going to be questionable, but I think you got to go point guard.
Yep. So yeah, Cason Wallace, Anthony Black, Keontae George, guys like Taylor Hendricks, Jarris Walker, maybe the Thompson twin, one of the Thompson twins falls to pick 8. We'll see. We'll talk about it on Locked On Wizards. Hell to the Wizards. Peace.
Before last year, the Pacers hadn't picked in the top 7 since the 1980s. They'll do so for the 2nd straight season now after securing the number 7 pick in the draft last night. Locked On Pacers tells us more on where Indiana stands as it settles into the middle of the lottery.
Tony East here with Locked On Pacers inside the Convention Center where the draft lottery just took place. And the Pacers land 7th, technically above their median, which is a supposed good outcome for them. They didn't fall in the lottery, but they didn't move up. Kevin Pritchard, their president of basketball operations, just told us that when they were drawing the first 4 combos for the first overall pick, the first 3 numbers matched a Pacers combo, but the 4th one made it a Spurs pick. Thus, no Victor Wembanyama for the Pacers, who will instead pick 7th, their second highest pick since the 1980s after picking 6th last year and drafting Benedict Mathurin. Suspenseful night, Tyrese Halliburton on stage, stoic as ever as the Pacers were announced to be picking 7th. They'll still have some good choices in there. Cam Whitmore, the Thompson twins, Jarris Walker, Taylor Hendricks, some of the names that have been mocked in that range after the top 3, and we'll see. Things always change between now and the draft. For more coverage of the lottery and the upcoming picks, we'll have more on Locked On Pacers. Please tune in.
Coming up, the Spurs take the top pick and get the rights to Victor Wembanyama. This is Locked On Game to Game, NBA. Welcome back. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thanks again for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. We already heard from Locked On Magic on the number 6 pick, so now we move on to the top 5, where the Detroit Pistons became the biggest losers of the lottery. Detroit fell out of the top 4 after having the worst record in the NBA last season, and Locked On Pistons goes over what it means as the worst case scenario comes true.
This was the worst possible outcome there was. Host of Locked On Pistons podcast. Kook Hill here. The Detroit Pistons could have fallen to 5. That was the farthest they could fall. And that's exactly what they did. There was no shakeup at all in this draft lottery, all the way up until the 5th overall pick, where the first shakeup of the entire lottery happened with the Detroit Pistons falling number 5. So they lose out on Victor Wembanyama. They're going to lose out on Scoot Henderson. For those of you guys who are very high on Brandon Miller, they will also lose out on Brandon Miller. They lost the most important lottery they've probably ever been a part of. And not only just lost it, but they fell all the way down to 5, which is their largest drop in franchise history in this lottery system. The previous highest was 2 spots they fell. This time they dropped 4 spots. Worst night that could possibly have happened, and that's exactly what just happened. So great day for all Pistons fans across the league. Great day.
The Houston Rockets will pick in the top 4 for the 3rd straight season after earning the number 4 pick in this year's draft. Locked On Rockets says it's an interesting spot that gives Houston a lot of options on draft day.
The Houston Rockets land the 4th overall selection in this year's NBA draft lottery. What's up? This is Jackson Gatlin from Locked On Rockets. Look, this is the outcome Rockets fans wanted. You miss out on the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes. You also miss out on the consolation prize of Scoot Henderson. Pick number 4 is the one with the most question marks. Do you hold on to the pick and draft somebody like Amin Thompson or Jarris Walker? Do you trade the pick? Do you trade back down further deeper into the draft to pick up an asset for doing so? Who knows? There are a lot of question marks about this pick. However, the silver lining, if you're a Rockets fan and still want Scoot Henderson, the 2 teams ahead of the Rockets in the lottery, the Charlotte Hornets at pick number 2 and the Portland Trail Blazers at pick number 3, they already have their point guards in LaMelo Ball and Damian Lillard. There is a very slim chance Scoot Henderson could fall all the way down to the Rockets at pick number 4, or they could trade up from pick number 4 to pick 2 or 3 to try and draft Scoot Henderson themselves. The only guarantee is that Rafael Stone and the rest of the Rockets front office will absolutely have their work cut out for them moving forward.
The Trailblazers jumped up into the top 4. They were one of the biggest benefactors of the lottery system last night, moving up to the number 3 pick. Locked On Blazers looks at the options for Portland.
The Blazers got lucky, but didn't get all the luck they needed in the draft lottery, coming up just short of bringing Victor Wembanyama to Portland. I am Mike Richmond, host of Locked On Blazers, and Portland jumped from the 5th spot to the 3rd spot, but couldn't get all the way there to number 1 to land the generational talent in Victor Wembanyama. They'll now likely choose between Scoot Henderson and Brandon Miller with the 3rd pick, but more likely, they're now armed with trade leverage. They've pretty much telegraphed their plan, which is to trade any pick that wasn't the number 1 overall pick, along with some veterans, or along with some players on their roster, most likely Anthony Simons, to land veterans, to build around Dame. Damian Lillard has been very clear that he doesn't want to build, he doesn't want to go young, he doesn't want to be patient, he wants to take a swing, and now the Blazers, who have been very clear that they want to keep Dame happy and keep him in Portland, are armed to make that swing. So instead of asking yourself who you're going to draft, maybe start asking yourself who might be interested in Brandon Miller.
Now we're down to it. Last night's NBA draft lottery was really about one single player, Victor Wembanyama. The San Antonio Spurs won the chance to pick one of the most hyped prospects in NBA history. Our Locked On Spurs host joins us to go over what this is going to mean for the future in San Antonio.
The San Antonio Spurs do it again. This is Jeff Garcia of Locked On Spurs, and the San Antonio Spurs have won the NBA Draft Lottery 2023. Goes without saying the Spurs will select Victor Wembanyama out of France. And look, the Spurs now have a franchise player they can build around with Victor, and along with the current pieces they have, he should fit in seamlessly. With Victor now in San Antonio, he will help shorten the Spurs' current rebuild and make a financial impact on and off the court. So first it was Robinson, then Duncan, now Wemby. Anytime there's a big man in the NBA draft lottery, looks like the basketball gods smile on the San Antonio Spurs.
That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NBA Draft Lottery Edition. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On NBA and your favorite team's Locked On podcast on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.